This weekend at the box office, Sonic the Hedgehog takes a second lap at number 1. Meanwhile, The Call of the Wild exceeds expectations in the face of its mountainous budget. All this and more on this episode of The Weekend Take.
You're listening to The Weekend Take, and now your host, Sean Schaefer.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Weekend Take. I'm your host, Sean Schaefer, and joining me this week is box office analyst Jake Carnes. Jake, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. It's great to finally have you on the show. I know you were scheduled some time ago to join us, and we're like two ships crossing. It was during season 1's brief hiatus, so now Here you are. Glad to get you on, to get your views, and I feel like this is going to be quite the mental matchup here, as you are a box office analyst, and I am but a pretender.
Well, I hope so. But you're not pretending. You're actually doing it. As long as you're looking at the figures and paying attention to what's going on, I think that's actually worth the time.
For those of you new to the show, The Weekend Take is a weekly podcast that breaks down the weekend box office results but goes beyond the numbers to look at the talking points and trends of the film industry. We'll get started the way we do each week by looking at the films that left the top 10. So this week there were two films that left the top 10, the first of which was Downhill, which dropped from the number 10 position down to number 13. Downhill from Fox Searchlight took in $1.4 million, a 69% drop from last week, despite seeing a 10-theater increase in its count, bringing its count up to 2,311. The film only averaged $619 per screen, and after 2 weeks in release, it brings its cume up to $7.4 million. The other film to leave the top 10 this week was Doolittle from Universal Pictures, which dropped from the number 9 position down to number 12. Doolittle takes in $1.8 million, a 62% drop from last week. The film lost 604 screens to bring its count down to 2,265. An $816 per screen average brings its cume up to $74.5 million here in its 6th week of release. So Jake, looking at the films that left the top 10 this week, anything surprise you? I know for me, I was completely expecting Downhill to leave after its awful opening weekend.
Oh, definitely.
How about for you?
Force Majeure, the movie that Downhill was based on. What a great film, came out 6 years ago. It's a Ruben Östlund film. I just don't sometimes see why we need to remake the films. Why we need to remake it instead of marketing the films here. It came out just 6 years ago. It's not like it was that long ago. And I actually feel like it was a better film.
People would feel the same way about, The Upside that STX Entertainment put out last year.
Yeah.
That also was a remake of a French comedy.
I think that we end up doing that quite a bit. It used to work back in the 90s. There was that, it came out in the 90s. I really liked the French version of it. It was two time-traveling dudes came from the medieval times. Les Visiteurs. Just Visiting. They remade it into Just Visiting, which it did okay. It had a $35 million budget, I think, and the box office was all right. Well, no, that's not true. $16.2 million on the box office. So it didn't really work that well back in the day either. This one was with Jean Reno and Christina Applegate.
I may actually have to check that out because I actually am a fan of Jean Reno, and I did not know that film existed. So
he was good in the remake, of course, but he was in the original as well. And I just think that the humor, it can still translate from the French humor to American humor. Look at Luc Besson and how well his films generally, at least used to do here.
Right.
Valerian was kind of a, whatever, but it did incredibly well in Europe, and I don't see a problem with that film like everyone had when that came out. But these remakes, I feel like it's unnecessary. We should just market the films from Europe. We end up with films over there all the time that are redubbed and sent over there, but we end up with films over here that are, subtitled, and they show up at your local art film theater, not in the Cinemarks or the AMCs or Lowe's theaters that they should be in.
And looking at the other film that left the top 10 is Doolittle, which another creation of an already existing intellectual property. There was the original,
Rex Harrison,
and then Eddie Murphy took a swing at it, and now Robert Downey Jr. figures he needed something to bridge the gap between Avengers and Sherlock Holmes, and so he did this movie.
I did like Sherlock Holmes. His Sherlock Holmes was great, but I feel like I'm sick of hearing Robert Downey Jr. do an accent.
And also, he's the same Tony Stark persona across the board.
Always. He's the same guy everywhere. It's Robert Downey Jr. He's got a different job and a different name this time, but he's here. It's Robert Downey Jr. I'd like him to go back to the days of Chaplin when he actually played Charlie Chaplin pretty well.
Yeah.
Characters like the one on Ally McBeal. He was her boyfriend for a little while, I think. He was Robert Downey Jr., but I felt like there was something wholesome about it. There was something that isn't Robert Downey Jr. about that character.
It's certainly reflected outside of these box office numbers with audiences as well, because for Downhill, it currently scores a 39 on Rotten Tomatoes critic score, has a D in cinema score, which is polling the audiences exiting the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Doolittle is not much better. I mean, it's actually worse in Rotten Tomatoes, has a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oof.
And a B on cinema score. So at least people coming out of the theater like Doolittle more than they like Downhill. But
I did expect that, though. I was expecting to have to berate all of the Marvel fans in the Facebook groups that I frequent ever so often. Just to, with my job, I like to actually see what people are interested in. Which films are they interested in? Because Captain Marvel was kind of a weird aura around that film with the fans. They, for some reason, didn't like it, whereas you had other fans who really did like it. So to figure out what this film's going to do in the future, generally I'm not looking at Marvel films because there's no need for any of that. They're going to do well, probably. But I do like to take a look and just see what's going on with the audience. And I was expecting to have to yell at these kids about going, you're sitting here lauding Robert Downey Jr. as some kind of god. He deserved the Oscar, is what they keep saying. But they didn't go see Doolittle.
Now they're going to move ahead in the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we see where all that goes. But
Robert Downey Jr. is out of it, so go make sure you go see your Robert Downey Jr. movies, because he ain't going to be in your Marvel films anymore.
No, he's not. I mean, unless everything really falls apart outside of the Marvel roles that he's played, then they may have to find some way to write him back in.
Yeah, Susan Downey will do what she did the first time. Get him a job as Iron Man.
Number 10.
Kicking off the countdown at number 10, down from number 4 this week, is The Photograph from Universal Pictures, which took in $2.8 million, a 77% drop from last week. Now, that's not just bad, that's like all-time bad, as it now will be in like the top 25 of worst second weekend drops. More finalize the number once the actuals come out Monday afternoon. The film was playing on 2,516 screens. Its count doesn't change as it's still part of its 2-week contractual obligation to theaters. The film averaged just over $1,100 per screen still, and after 2 weeks sees its cum rise to $17.6 million.
Number 9.
Next up in the countdown at number 9, down from number 8 this week, is Jumanji, The Next Level from Sony, which took in $3 million, a 46% drop from last week. The film lost 603 screens, bringing its count down to 2,126. The film's still averaging over $1,400 per screen here in its 11th week of release, as it brings its cum just shy of $311 million domestically.
Number 8.
Next up in the countdown at number 8, down from number 7, is this year's Academy Award winner for Best Picture, Parasite, from Neon, which took in $3.1 million, a 45% drop from last week. The film lost 196 screens, bringing its count down to 1,805. The film's still averaging just over $1,700 per screen, and after its 20th week of release, sees its cum rise to just under $49 million.
Number 7.
Next up in the countdown, we have at number 7, down from number 3, Fantasy Island from Sony as well. The film took in just under $4.2 million, a 66% drop from last week. Its theater count held steady at 2,784, and its per-screen average was $1,500 per screen as it sees its cum rise to $20.1 million here in its second week of release against a $7 million budget.
Number 6.
And lastly, to round out the bottom half of our top 10 at number 6, staying put at number 6, is 1917, which took in $4.4 million, a 45.6% drop. The film actually gained 641 screens this week, bringing its count back up to 2,725 screens. A $1,600 per screen average brings its cum up to $151.9 million here in its 9th week of release for the Academy Award-winning picture from Universal Pictures. So, Jake, looking at the bottom half of our top 10, what kind of stands out to you? What are your thoughts?
Well, the photograph with that horrendous drop, that was absolutely amazing. I have no clue what this film is, to be honest. That's terrible. I actually posted something today on Reddit's box office, which is the worst community I think I've ever been a part of. I posted today Cinema Blend's article regarding, yes, Birds of Prey had a big box office drop this weekend, but not the worst. Not the worst is regarding the photograph in the article, and I have been downvoted past 0, but it's a hot topic. Looks like 28 comments right now on it. I find it very interesting that people are going off on this specific post because they didn't look at the fact that the photograph is what we're talking about. I don't think anybody really knows what this movie is.
And even looking at last week when I had Solomon Nero on and we were going through the top 10, he didn't have an idea of what the film is. Now, I looked it up. I know what the synopsis of the film is, and I have an idea of it. I never saw a trailer for it.
Yeah.
It seems like Universal put all their eggs into one basket to really promote the opening weekend of the film. And it's not that it's a bad film, at least by the numbers. I mean, it's got a B+ on Cinema Score, so not terrible. I mean, that's, better than Dolittle or Downhill. And it's got a 75 on Rotten Tomatoes, also better than Dolittle and Downhill. When you have a film that's got fairly good scores, why the huge drop?
That's upsetting.
Did Universal just really just put all their marketing dollars to push the opening weekend and then went completely radio silent after Sunday? I mean, is that what happened here? Or
maybe they were going the Disney route and front loading it by buying out No, I'm just joking. That's not a real thing. But I don't know. I really don't know. I have heard nothing about it, so I'm just assuming without the promotion and advertising that was necessary to get people into that theater, you're not going to have anybody.
It's quite the enigma as to why such a massive drop. I mean, I could see if it had terrible scores.
Sure.
Like Fantasy Island has terrible scores, and that's why it dropped 66%. But this dropped 77% with no theater change.
They got word of mouth as far as they could.
I'll ask you a question. As a box office analyst, maybe you have some insight on this. What is Sony doing with these Jumanji pictures that gives them the longevity that no other studio can find right now?
It's exactly what I was about to bring up right now, because when you look at Jumanji versus The Last Jedi, absolutely amazing how it beat the hell out of The Last Jedi a couple of years ago. It was something else. You had, of course, the big front load on people going to see the Star Wars movie. But then Jumanji just came in and hit number 1. And I think it was number 1 for 4 weeks. It was something else. I really had a good time watching that. And then just looking at the sequel to that movie, I said, of course it's going to do well. It's up against a Star Wars. People are upset about the last Star Wars. This one's going to go through.
It's still in the top 10 after 11 weeks. I mean,
that's absolutely amazing.
That just doesn't happen much anymore unless you're an award winner. Like, for instance, 1917.
Yeah.
9 weeks in release. It's spent all 9 weeks of release in the top 10. I bet there are studios that want to find a way to replicate whatever it is that Sony is doing for these Jumanji films, because other releases of theirs don't follow the same path and longevity. I mean,
definitely.
Obviously, Fantasy Island is going to probably not be in the top 10 next week. That's only 3 weeks in release. I mean, just looking at what they have out right now. Bad Boys for Life. Okay, so it's 6 weeks in release. It's still in the top 10. It probably also has a bit of life to it left in the top 10.
A little bit. At least some more. It's also one of the only ones that has black leads at the moment.
I didn't think about that. That is true, yeah.
Because especially after the Oscars, what everyone's talking about, there's still not a lot of black people here. It's true. It kind of shows with the top 10 list right now. It is kind of biased. I don't really get into this too much, though. I don't like to talk about the racialism about films, but
Sonic's the only blue person in the top 10.
That's very true.
And we'll get to it when we get to the top half of the top 10 talking about Bad Boys, but I think Will Smith is drinking the same elixir as Dwayne Johnson, or made the same deal with the devil that Dwayne did, because neither of them seem to age, and when they really get into a blockbuster, unless it's called After Earth.
Oof. You hurt me there with that. I haven't heard those two words together in a while. I find Jumanji, there's something about it. I think that, I don't know if you saw the film. I don't want to spoil anything.
I haven't seen it, and it's one of those things where, I didn't see the last one only because I was one of those people who was like, you can't make a Jumanji film after Robin Williams has passed. And people are like, no, this isn't like they're trying to rip him off.
Yeah, they're not crapping on it. It's not a spoiler, but I will say I think with the next one they're going to try to link the original Jumanji film with this franchise that they've got going.
Okay.
I really think that's where they're going with it, and I think that's why they are thriving. I don't really know. I think it has something to do with just that nostalgia from Jumanji, but they aren't stepping all over it. They've continued the story gracefully, I feel. I hate these franchises, but they're doing it well.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.
My last thought on the bottom half of the top 10 here concerns Fantasy Island. So, first of all, it's a genre horror picture. It was made for $7 million. It's already more than made its money back. It's going to be a profit. It's a weird trend that studios are doing with like Fantasy Island, which its original intellectual property or it's based on material that wasn't horror by any means.
Not even a little bit.
Much like last year with the Banana Splits movie. The Banana Splits were not horror, and they turned them into horror. Is this just something that we can just expect to continue? I mean, genre horror pictures, I know, will always be a thing. But can we expect more properties to get the horror revamp?
Certainly. Why not the Honeymooners? Let's take Ralph Cramden and turn him into some kind of Jack Torrance kind of character, and just do that. If we're gonna do this, I mean, Jason Blum, this guy. Back in the day, Paranormal Activity made that for, I think, $14,500, marketed it for who knows how much, and made back millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on this really, really easily done method. It's Blair Witch Project, but it's in a house this time, and it's scary. Ooh, he's got it. I don't know what the hell kind of upbringing he had, but he is a horror master. He'll be lauded up there with Vincent Price and Peter Lorre and all those back in the day doing their horror stuff just because he is cranking them out as fast as he possibly can.
And not only is he cranking them out, but they're all turning a profit because he can make them so cheaply.
So cheaply. They are the cheapest movies. I'd assume that promotion and advertising is the most expensive thing that this guy's ever done.
And we'll get to see more of his handiwork next week when The Invisible Man comes out.
This Invisible Man might be a better route, though, as much as I want to give this guy, the business. The one that Universal wanted to do their dark universe. They started it out with Dracula Untold, and then they put out The Mummy, and then realized that wasn't going to work. I know they were very interested in redoing all of them in The Invisible Man. I actually feel like the trailers that I've seen for the Blumhouse Invisible Man, that looks like a more compelling story than anybody's got for an Invisible Man story, especially if you're going to keep to the original. I mean, if you want to go Claude Rains and go like the book, that's fun. But I don't think that's going to bring in the audiences. People don't care about that type of stuff anymore. You can only do Sherlock Holmes era stuff with Sherlock Holmes right now. I feel that people don't want to go back in time too much. I can't wait to see the It's a Wonderful Life Blumhouse horror remake. He's going to kill his boss, that old man. It's going to be crazy.
He's going to hold up the bank when all the banks are trying to close down.
Yeah, there it is. Going to get in a shootout with the cops. Yeah, it's going to be big.
Number 5.
All right, so now we'll get into the top half of our top 10, and starting off at number 5, staying put at number 5 from last week, is Bad Boys for Life from Sony, which took in $5.8 million, a 49% drop from last week. The film only lost 213 screens, bringing its count down to 2,972. The film is still averaging just under $2,000 per screen, and here in its 6th week of release has brought its cume up to $191.1 million.
Number 4.
Next up at number 4 is our first new release of the week. It's Brahms, The Boy 2 from STX Entertainment. The film took in $5.9 million on 2,151 screens, translating to a $2,742 per screen average, and as I mentioned here in the opening frame, has accumulated a total of $5.9 million for the horror sequel from STX that is currently boasting a $10 million budget.
Number 3.
Next up at number 3, down from number 2 this week, is The Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. That film took in $7 million this week, an almost 60% drop from last week. The film lost 671 screens, so it doesn't really equate to the 60% drop with its theater count loss, as it's still playing on 3,565 screens. The per-screen average of just under $2,000. Here in its third week of release, it has brought its cume up to $72.5 million.
Number 2.
Next up in the top 10 is our second new release of the week. At number 2 is The Call of the Wild from 20th Century Fox, which took in $24.8 million here in its opening weekend on 3,752 screens, which translates to a $6,600 per screen average. And so here, as I mentioned, in its opening frame, it's brought its cume up to $24.8 million, but it is competing against a reported $135 million budget. So unfortunately for Harrison Ford, unless he's got the Millennium Falcon to get him there faster, it's got a long way to go to get to $135 million.
That's funny.
Number 1.
And lastly, at number 1, for the second weekend in a row, is the surprise hit from Paramount Pictures, Sonic the Hedgehog, which we've discussed at length, and earlier this year in a Patreon patron exclusive episode. It had pushed from a November release date to February, which is when most movies go to die. It had a whole redesign. There's a lot of things that were supposed to be red flags going against this film, and yet nothing's stopping Sonic. He's just too fast, I guess, because its second weekend in release, it takes in $26.3 million, a 55% drop from last week. The film actually picked up some screens, picking up 31 screens to bring its count up to 4,198. The film is still averaging over $6,200 per screen and has brought its cume after 2 weeks in release to $106.6 million on just an $85 million budget. And worldwide has brought its cume up to $203 million, which is roughly the break-even point if you're using a 2.5 times multiplier. What are your thoughts from an analyst point of view at looking at Sonic the Hedgehog? I mean, should this film have made this much money?
This film should not be making as much money as it did, but that's the fun part about this whole thing. My goodness. I don't know. I have this conspiracy theory that Sonic the Hedgehog, as it is in the theaters today, is exactly what they made. They put out a trailer that they made with a bad Sonic to drum up the internet talk, get all the fans talking, blah, 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 blah. And then, oh, yeah, let's not do November. That's a bad idea. Let's go ahead and move to February. Look at that. Amazing. Look how much money we made. I really just kind of feel like this is one of those cases where it's like, I mean, it's Paramount. Give me a break. With the CBS merger and everything like that, they needed something. What does Paramount have any time when you think about it? I mean, I every time I think of Paramount, I think of the old Indiana Jones films. I don't really think of anything else.
I'll play devil's advocate to the theory. So Paramount sees that they've put Sonic up to release in November. They know that they're going to face stiff competition the moment Frozen 2 hits the screens.
Mm-hmm.
They need a reason to move the film, but if they move it just because, then it starts to look like the studio doesn't have faith in the film. So we have to have a reason to move it. And what better reason than to appease our fans by putting out a terrible design of Sonic and saying, wait, we're going to make it better because we love you and we love your fandom.
Mm-hmm.
And we also love your money at the box office.
I personally just believe they put out a good movie initially and said they did a bad one. They made a bad trailer for us to talk about so we could move it. It just makes so much sense. I really just don't understand why they would have changed it in the first place, because what they initially put out in that trailer, wow. Like, you didn't pass that by anybody at all. Like, nobody's kids. People who worked on the film, I feel, grew up with Sonic the Hedgehog. Nobody had a problem with that. Nobody said, hey, guys, this isn't going to work, and I can get 5 of my cousins on the phone right now to tell you ain't going to work either. It's problems. I mean, it's Problem City if you're in between the ages of, I feel like, 24 and 40 right now with Sonic the Hedgehog. Everybody knew that wasn't going to work. That wasn't real. They actually did the way it's in the theater now. They put on a bad trailer for us to talk about.
Well, it definitely worked.
It definitely worked. I was actually incredibly surprised because, good God, Jim Carrey was the most annoying person in the world. And then here he is. Everyone was talking crap about the way he's going to look as Robotnik. And then I saw the movie. I didn't like the movie personally. I think it was crap. But I can see why people would like the movie. Personally, as somebody who read the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books as a child and watched the Jaleel White animated series as well, I don't know. I feel like that character of Robotnik is something that nobody was really expecting from Jim Carrey for this. I like that. I like that surprise. They showed us something in the trailers that it was just a bit of the entire character.
I took my daughter to see the film last week. Yeah, I was really surprised at how they portrayed Robotnik. First of all, I was glad that they went with Robotnik and not Dr. Egghead like they did at one point in the animated series.
Yeah. Well, he will be, I'm sure, in the sequel. He'll be Dr. Egghead.
Yeah.
They're going to change it, probably, just to screw with us.
Of course. And if they're really going to go all out, they need to have Jim Carrey get fitted for a fat suit if they're really going to pull off Robotnik.
I mean, for sure, right? How are they going to fix this whole thing for us?
You fix Sonic, you've already committed to the pot. Now you have to fix everything else.
I did like James Marsden, though. I will say, as much as I didn't like the film, James Marsden is always a pleasure. He's a wonderful actor. He's fun.
I mean, people have just associated him directly with Cyclops from the X-Men.
I hated him as Cyclops.
This film should not make this much money releasing at this time of year, but they just found this perfect time frame to release the film because, it had been 5 weeks since Dolittle had come out.
Mm-hmm.
We're still 3 weeks away from Onward.
Onward. That's the one I'm worried about with the Sonic the Hedgehog. You're going to end up losing a lot of that. That might end up moving out of the top 10 by that point. I doubt it, but there's the possibility.
As anybody who's seen the film knows, it sets itself up for a sequel, pretty directly.
Oh, very directly.
Paramount already has that in mind, and so that, I think, lends itself even more into the theory that maybe Paramount knew what they were doing the whole time.
Yeah.
I don't think it's much of a spoiler to anybody, but at the very end, we are introduced to Tails. And so the question is there a really freaky humanoid Tails design somewhere?
I hope so. Throw that in for the people who didn't see the first one. There's your trailer. And then Knuckles, of course, but it's Ugandan Knuckles, and he can show us the way.
Yes. But looking at the rest of the films here in the top 5, I mean, obviously The Call of the Wild opened to larger than it was expected, but it's a really big budget. It's $135 million.
Did you see the trailer? That fictional dog that is not a real dog cost them so much money. And then Harrison Ford made them donate the rest to some kind of charity, I'm sure. It's a lot of money.
It is. I mean, even with an opening weekend of $25 million, I can't see this being a profitable entity for Fox. I think this is whereas Sonic was, we expected it to come to February and die, and it didn't. Call of the Wild is coming to February to die.
Yeah. I'm actually really surprised that it almost beat Sonic this weekend because everybody was going on about, oh my gosh, the Call of the Wild's going to beat Sonic this week, and I said, no, it's not. Just wait. And here we are. It doesn't look like it's going to. It's 2 million under. Well, what were they looking at? Call of the Wild. The Call of the Wild is a book I read when I was 9 years old, I think, in elementary school. Jack London, wonderful. You got White Fang, you got Call of the Wild. I mean, what's the problem here with everyone's doing a franchise deal? Everyone wants to make these universes. Make a Jack London universe and do it right. You don't need Harrison Ford to sell your Jack London universe movie if you do it the correct way. Don't do it in the way that Jack London would hate it. This seems like a wholesome story instead of an adventure like it should be.
To me, it almost seems like the trailers they put out wanted to promote the wholesome story part just to get families to come out on the vacation week.
Sure.
I think there might be a little bit more adventure to it and in it than the trailers are leading to believe, because if you see a bunch of this adventure, maybe they're not taking the younger kids out to it. I don't know. I've always been really baffled by the way Fox goes about marketing their films.
You can't call it Fox anymore, buddy. It's 21st Century Studios. Or 20th Century Studios.
For instance, last year, almost exactly around this time, they put out The Kid Who Would Be King.
Oh.
They spent almost the same amount of money on it, and they put maybe about the same amount of marketing to it and the same amount, fewer theaters in Call of the Wild. Maybe they just gave up knowing that the Disney acquisition was almost completed.
I mean, I actually do have a question about that Kid Who Would Be King story. Why can't these ancient and very, very powerful beings and figures from the past, why can't they wait just 13 years until this kid's like 26 years old to enact their wonderful plan, getting all their good stuff back or defeating the evil villain? Why is it? I mean, they've waited 1,000 years and stuff in most of these cases. Can't they wait like another 10 years at least? Get this kid in his 20s. He's an adult at this point. He's strong. He's always 12. Hey, I know we've waited 982 years. Couldn't we make it an even 10,000? Or 1000, 1000, whatever. Oh my gosh, I'm not even paying attention to numbers now. We've moved so far off the box office. My apologies.
You're listening to The Weekend Take. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.
Yeah, so looking at Bad Boys for Life, I mean, the third film, and by the end of its theatrical run, it'll have made more than the first two films combined domestically.
I did see that. That is something else.
So therefore, obviously it sets it up beautifully for Sony to say, hey, we're going to do it again.
I'm pretty pissed off at them, though, because why would you do this to me? I'm the type of person who looks at the movies with Daniel Radcliffe and all of them and says, hey, you're going to do a movie about the Four Horsemen called Now You See Me and do a sequel. You got to call that sequel, and now you don't? But they didn't. They called it Now You See Me 2. That's stupid. I'm pretty upset with Bad Boys 3 being called Bad Boys for Life.
Yep.
Very upsetting. Michael Bay, come on.
I thought the same thing when I saw those Bad Boys for Life. I'm like, was there a third one that I don't know about?
There was. It just happened in your imagination because they want you to think there was.
Brahms, The Boy 2 from STX Entertainment.
What a great Blumhouse film.
That wasn't Blumhouse.
Not even a little bit. It's STX the entire time. But I'm sitting here thinking, wow, it's like Annabelle.
Yep. And it's a reported $10 million budget. It opened to just under $6 million. I think this will be a close call. But STX is that distributor that takes chances on films. I mean, if nothing else, I credit them for being the studio that will take a risk. And sometimes that pays off, like when they acquired The Upside from the Weinstein Group when it went bankrupt.
Very true.
Sometimes it doesn't, like when they acquired Playmobil the movie. For every time they get a successful property, like even Hustlers,
yeah,
they have to have a couple of bombs here and there. And I think ultimately the Boy 2 will be that for them, because I see at least a 65% drop next week. I don't see this. I see this leaving the top 10 by its third weekend release. So
there's no way that this can continue. And I mean, to be honest, this is for the Halloweeners. This is for the people that think that Halloween doesn't end. They like to keep their decorations up. This is for those people.
We can't not talk about one Harley Quinn.
Oof.
Because here in its third weekend release, a 60% drop.
Yeah.
This film will end up being the lowest of the DC Extended Universe films. And I would venture a guess, and here's where we'll use your expertise. Will the disappointing performance of this film affect James Gunn's Suicide Squad because Harley Quinn is in it?
I don't think so, personally. James Gunn has a lot of clout. That guy's got the Marvel crowd on his side. There is a big disparity between Marvel fans and DC fans. They don't like each other. The ones who are the diehards, not the ones who like comic books, not the ones who like these comic book movies. The people who specifically like Marvel, the people who specifically like DC, they got a problem with each other. This is one of those hopefuls where can we bring the two together? Really, the guy getting fired from the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and everything, and then moving over to Suicide Squad, it's absolutely amazing move for DC, for Warner Brothers, to get this director who people actually love. You got Taika Waititi, sure, he's got the Thor movies, You got
The Russo brothers.
Oh, thank you. I've had Dupless in my head for the last couple of days because of that kerfuffle over the horse girl and that movie, the God Inside My Ear. I've had the Dupless brothers stuck in my head for a while, and I almost said Cohen even. This is terrible. The Russos. People know these people to a point. The fans definitely do. I think people know James Gunn. I think it's going to be helpful for Suicide Squad that he's on that.
I went and saw Birds of Prey.
Me too.
And I'll ask you a few thoughts, though. I could tell what scenes the director of John Wick helped with, because it felt like it was all the solo fight scenes that Harley was involved in.
Okay.
The group fight scenes felt like I was watching the human equivalent of a Transformers fight.
Ooh, that sounds fun. Yeah, I like that. That's actually a good way to put it.
There's just limbs flailing everywhere, and I couldn't really tell who was fighting who. And they trying to use props in the funhouse didn't really work out. But
Well, I don't know, actually. I fell asleep, I think, during that point. I fell asleep once during that movie. I fell asleep twice during Sonic the Hedgehog, though.
oh, well,
And I actually can't help you with the John Wick director sequences. I've never seen any John Wick film. I feel like a bad person for saying it.
I mean, generally, I think Harley Quinn's got enough goodwill, because if you look at the scores, it's got 78% Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a B+ on Cinema Score.
I didn't hate it.
I didn't hate it. I thought it was okay.
Parts of it were garbage. Parts of it were excellent. Say that about most films, I suppose. I mean, I don't really know. People have been trying to throw this one under the bus hardcore, and I say, yeah, no, it's doing poorly. It's not doing as poorly as everyone's saying it's doing, and it's not doing as great as other people are saying it's doing. I mean, you look at the people who are saying Ford versus Ferrari, comparable budget. Ford versus Ferrari, comparable take in the box office. Everyone says Ford versus Ferrari did well. Ford versus Ferrari wasn't one of those blockbuster movies. That was an Oscar film. They weren't expecting everybody to go see this film. I can't actually put them together and say, oh yeah, no. You put this together with Suicide Squad, any other Batman movie. You throw that together with those. You can't throw it with Ford versus Ferrari. I mean, give me a break. Just because you had Christian Bale in it doesn't mean it's a Batman movie.
So that about wraps up this top 10 countdown for this weekend. But, looking ahead to next week, there's actually only one wide release next week, and it's Invisible Man from Blumhouse. Are you interested to see this? Does this title interest you?
I'm not, but I am. It's like I said, what Universal wanted to do with their Dark Universe and Invisible Man, I'm just going to go ahead and expect this is going to be better. It just seems like a better idea. Universal doesn't sometimes have the best ideas for things, and I think one of the best examples of that is the Dark Universe. I think they've waited too long. The Mummy was done better in 1999 than they did it just recently.
Agreed.
Brendan Fraser and Arnold Vosloo, Rachel Weisz, oh my goodness, John Hannah. Absolutely amazing cast, first off. With a compelling story that wasn't exactly the same as the original, but wasn't so far off. Don't get me wrong, with the new Mummy film, I loved Tom Cruise playing kind of a smarmy bad guy. It's like the only time I've ever seen him play kind of a bastard. He's kind of, he's a grave robber, is what he is. I enjoyed seeing that, but then you have Russell Crowe come in and say, you can't mess with me, even though you're a younger man at one point in the film. And I said at that moment, oh my God. Wait a second. No, Tom Cruise is totally older than Russell Crowe. And I was right. It was ridiculous. What they were doing was just bad. And I can even say that with Dracula Untold. I was not compelled. They're trying to update these stories, and it was just awful. It was terrible. So when they announced The Invisible Man, I'm like, I'm really just not interested in seeing what you've got to do. But when you pull in Jason Blum, at least you're going to have something. And I'm expecting this to be a lot like Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon. But I feel like this is one of those ones where it's like, you had a better idea than they were going to do. Give it your all. Give it your all.
So looking at the prospects of The Invisible Man, does The Invisible Man open well enough to take Sonic out of the #1 spot next week?
I don't think so. As much as I've seen stuff for it. I haven't seen enough. I think Sonic's got this one. Same with Call of the Wild. I didn't start seeing Call of the Wild stuff until Call of the Wild was coming out. Sonic had been on the radar forever. People are going to keep going to see that with their kids. It's their kids' new favorite movie. You're going to have repeat viewers. This is Sonic. It's all Sonic, I think. I'd like to give it to Universal for this one because they're doing such a great job all over the place. Wait, no, they're not. I don't know. Yeah, no, I really don't know. I look at this and I say I don't want Jason Blum to win. Don't get me wrong. I don't want Sonic to win either, though. I wish we had another movie opening to at least contest this, but I think Sonic has this for the next weekend again.
Well, it looks like the only thing Universal's done right then lately is 1917 is my guess then.
Yeah, and 1917. Whenever I look at that, I'm like, wow, this is such a great Spielberg movie that was made in Europe and brought over here for us. This isn't something that they would normally do. This is a fluke for me. Like, oh, good job, you got an Oscar.
Then wraps it up for us this week here at the Weekend Take. Jake, if listeners want to get in touch with you or get a hold of you, check out your work on social media, how's best to do that?
Well, you can follow me at Instagram.com/Carnes. You can go to Facebook.com/JCarnes77. Or you can follow our progress on Amen at Facebook.com/Amen the series.
And listeners can, of course, follow The Weekend Take on social media. We're on Facebook at Facebook.com/The Weekend Take. We're on Twitter at Weekend Take. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign at Patreon.com/The Weekend Take, where for as little as $1 per month, you can become a patron of The Weekend Take and get exclusive access to extended cuts of episodes, in case you want to hear more of the conversation Jake and I had today or any of our previous guests. You also get early access to episodes, and starting this season, Patreon patron exclusive episodes. There's actually a really good one, myself and Solomon Nero talking about the Sonic redesign a couple months back when they first announced the date push. So check that one out. And also there's an upcoming massive mini-series of episodes that I've dubbed The Rise and Fall of Skywalker, where we're going to look at the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy, and then, of course, the spin-offs and series, and look at the future of the Star Wars franchise. That'll all be exclusive to Patreon patrons. Again, that's patreon.com/The Weekend Take. But that wraps it up for us this week. So once again, Jake, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you very much.
And for all the listeners, I hope you have a great week ahead, and we will catch you all next week. Take care. Bye.
You've been listening to The Weekend Take. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Google Play, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Visit our Patreon page to become a patron of The Weekend Take, and for as little as $1, you'll receive exclusive content and perks.